are.
We're in
Hi.
business, everyone. Now we'll get Rebecca. Yes, fantastic. Okay, so thank you again for joining us. Very excited to be having this conversation. So to kick it off, again, thanks for your patience as we're a couple of minutes late, but thank you for joining Raising Intimacy, How Sex Tech Companies Have Raised Venture Capital. All of you, there's a chat function. Feel free to, ask questions, interact with us as much as possible. My name is Adrianna Samaniego. I'm an investor at Female Founders Fund, which is the leading institutional source for female founders raising seed rounds. And today I'm going to be speaking to Brianna Rader, founder of Juicebox. We have Lora DiCarlo, founder of Lora DiCarlo, Rebecca Alvarez Story, who's the founder of Bloomy, really to learn about the challenges and opportunities and some of the stigmas of building their sex tech businesses. So to begin with, would love to kick things off with each of you, kind of sharing a little bit more about your personal journey that led you to start this business and maybe the problem that you were looking to solve. So I will kick it off to Lora first.
That's always a fun one. It literally started with an orgasm. I think I was about 28 or 29 years old, and I was in healthcare at the time. I was actually studying on a long journey of becoming an orthopedic surgeon. And I was with a partner, and I had this like mind-bending blended orgasm when you stimulate the glans, clitoris, and the G-spot, or the urethral sponge more appropriately, at the same time, using digital penetration and cunnilingus. And it blew my mind. I literally shuddered off the side of the bed and kind of laid there in a drooling stupor, staring at the ceiling for a little while, just thinking like, dear Lord, how do I do that again? And how do I do it again by myself? And I kind of went on this like tirade of like, where's the product that's going to help me recreate this experience? And it didn't exist. And then I started looking for the data that would be needed to design a product that would help recreate the experience. That didn't exist either. So I started gathering that data on my own. And it took me a couple of years because I didn't quite know what I was going to do with it. It was just more of like a crazy curiosity that I had. And I knew there was a problem that needed to be solved. And so I was asking all these folks, like, can I have your physiological data? Can you measure this for me? Because I want to see if there's a trend in the data between people that have vaginas. And if there is, that means you can design something for that. And every person I talked to was, first thing, they were really embarrassed, and then subsequently very curious. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, none of them really knew enough about their own bodies. A lot of people I actually had to teach, like how to find this spot. Do you have that spot? Yeah, you have that spot. And then third, everybody wants to know, why are you asking this? This is still a little awkward. And when I told them it was because I had this orgasm and I know other people have as well, and I think there was a product that could be created, everybody was, every person reacted like, oh my gosh, when are you going to be done with it? When is it going to be produced? Can I have one? Can I get on a list? And that's when I started to really realize there was a market for this particular product, but also femme and LGBTQ designed products for people with bodies like ours. Mm-hmm. So I started the company in October of 2017, and we've gotten international PR coverage. We've started we actually started a whole movement around the gender bias in tech. After Amazing. We were getting an award at one of the biggest technology shows in the world, and then they took it away because it had to do with sex. So we're kind of on this constant path of disrupting as much as we can and bringing products like all of ours into the mainstream, because that's where it belongs. We firmly believe that sexual health and wellness is health and wellness, and it should be a part of a daily wellness and mindfulness routine. And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. And next we'll go with next on my screen, Brianna.
Hi, I'm Brianna. My journey really started with me being from Knoxville, Tennessee, and being queer. So growing up in like a really conservative religious environment in Tennessee, and being queer and like questioning maybe more than my peers were at like the lack of info we were given, especially Tennessee's like extra bad. They're not even allowed to mention anything other than abstinence in the public school systems, or teachers will be fined by the state. And so anyway, that was early journey. And then when I was in college, I started a local nonprofit to provide sex ed to college students in the state. And it talked about consent, pleasure, the whole topics, not just like birth control. And so it was controversial given the political environment. And they actually passed a bill through the state house and Senate legally condemning me and the organization. And it became like this huge news story, and we were like defunded. And so it was just like this sensationalized experience. And it made me realize how important this topic is for everyone and how hard it is to talk about. And it made me realize that the public sector probably really wasn't for me, because it's virtually impossible to work with school systems and health departments and deal with parents and like all the stakeholders. So that's when I got interested in the private sector. So my product is called SlutBot. The company is called Juicebox, and the bot is a bot that you sext with. So users sext with the bot and get an interactive erotic story every week. The whole purpose behind this is that I believe the fundamental issue with everyone's sex issues is communication. And so if you can learn from the bot and it role models healthy sexual communication, I hope people like pick up along the way, just like people learn from porn.
Fantastic. And then last, but certainly not least, Rebecca.
Hey everybody, my name is Rebecca. Alvarez story, pronouns are she, her. Bloomy really has been evolving throughout my life in different stages without me knowing. I am Latina and grew up in a very like hush culture. We didn't really talk about vulvas. We didn't really talk about periods. We definitely didn't talk about sex. But then what made it, I think, even more challenging is I went to a private all-girls Catholic high school on a scholarship. And that was my first exposure to sex ed. And we had to sign abstinence only contracts. It was ridiculously like far from what I thought the experience was going to be like. And then when I went to UC Berkeley, very progressive university, public university, I was just blown away at how many holistic sexual wellness classes were on campus. And that 180 experience just really showed me, you know, if I would have had this information years ago, it would have been better for my health. It would have been better for my relationships. There's so much value in having the information and you choosing what you want from it. So along that journey, I also was using a lot of products that I didn't realize were harming my body. And I learned also that Latina and Black women specifically, we have different pH levels in our vagina. And so I was more sensitive, just biologically more prone to infections. And all of this started coming together for me when I started doing deep dives into the space. I ended up becoming a sexologist because I knew that I wanted to dive deep into doing some form of education or product development after not having anything for so long. And what I found is that there's a lot of toxic, crappy ingredients in the products that people are using today. The market is highly unregulated. And so for me, it's sort of all blended, and Bloomy really was born as a solution to my clients when I was a sex coach and doing sex coaching all the time. It's a marketplace that offers people a one-stop destination for sexual wellness products and education on how to use them. So it's a lot of curated, fun stuff.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, all of you, and your personal stories to launching your businesses. So less than 2% of capital, as you guys know, goes to female founders or to women-led startups. And many funds have vice clauses, as you guys are familiar with. And so I'd love to hear and dive into your experiences around fundraising for a sex tech company, you know, thinking through what was that like for each of you. I know all of you have a different experience. Did most investors you pitch understand the market and the need for your product right away? And then, you know, did either of you bring on a new investor, being that their investment was the first, you know, sex tech investment that they had in their portfolio? So whoever would like to jump in first, or I can pick.
Sure, I'll jump in. I would say my journey has been really limited to angel investors. So we actually have no institutional funding from like a seed fund or a pre-seed fund. It's all from wealthy individuals. And it's because of what you already highlighted. I find it like really, really hard to convince funds of the market size early on. I think that funds are sometimes willing to play in the sexual wellness space, but their bar for like traction and like how far along you are, I think is much higher than markets that maybe they're like more familiar with. The second thing I would say is that there are some funds that like play in the space, which is cool. But I find that once a fund has one or maybe two sex investments, that's like it, because they are so paranoid about this idea of being known as like the sex fund. And that's like terrifying to them for some reason. And so that's a problem, because once we find out like, oh, Rebecca found a cool investor that is cool with the space, really that doesn't help us out very much anymore, because it seems like people are only willing to do that one shot. So that's why I've stuck to the wealthy individuals, and it bypasses the vice thing too.
And I would say for me, the journey has been, it's like two things. It's one, it's the industry we're in and the learnings of how LPs are expecting, funds to invest and where not to invest. So I was new to that vice clause when I first started fundraising a couple years ago. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And there's like all these other industries that are under the vice clause. I was like, but these are huge growing industries. So I didn't understand it, but definitely just like, it's the nature of the game for a lot of funds. And so I think there was a learning with that for me. But then on the other side, I feel like there was just an overall learning of how to fundraise. And even if I did boot camps, even if I did accelerators, it's one thing to talk about it and then hear from founders how they did it. And it's one thing to do it. And so for me, I think there was just a lot of lessons learned. I do think it's harder for many of us, all of us on this stage, because of the sector we're in. I think it's harder for me sometimes because I am Latina or first-time founder. There's these different layers. And at the end of the day, like, I think this is a huge business opportunity. And I was able to secure institutional investors, but it was not easy. It took a lot of pitching. It took a lot of refining. It took a lot of just like really being able to talk about numbers, like across the board, about the opportunity.
And then I'm going to throw in for Lora, I think, another angle of this question is alternative, capital to venture. And if anyone kind of experienced that.
Yeah, and that was something that I definitely wanted to kind of bring up, is that especially not only as female founders, queer founders, minority founders, but sex tech founders or first-time founders, VC's not the only way. Dealing with an LP or dealing even just with angel investors is not the only way. And I learned that we've raised over $11 million to date. And a lot of that came from angel investments and vehicles that we actually created on our own in order to accommodate for the opportunity zones that came out in 2018 that were actually very advantageous to wealthy individuals that were looking to not pay taxation on their cap gains. So that was a really good selling point. So basically, and if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, which I'm sure you don't, because I had no idea what I was talking about when I was talking about it anyway, when I started, was that if there was a law that came about in 2018 that if you build your business in an opportunity zone or an underfunded area where they want to grow space, grow businesses. If you put 70% of your assets in that space, and then it became very advantageous to create an opportunity zone fund where those investors can invest into that vehicle. And if they leave their money in for 10 years, there's zero taxation on cap gains. Long story short. So that was actually really helped one of my rounds. I think we got about 3 million into that round and did quite well. So, and then, just constantly working with, it's not always easy because there are a lot of accelerators and stuff. They kind of go for the same thing over and over again, but encourage them, like, what are other ways that we can fund? So right now, one of the other ways that we can fund, we actually raised our first VC round last year at another 3 million. We are currently, we've incorporated as a C Corp this year, alongside, and you also know that Cara Delevingne became a business partner of mine last year. And she actually put her own money into that round. So now we've actually converted into a C Corp. And we are, and I know Rebecca's done the same with Republic. So we're raising an equity crowdfunding round. So anybody watching this right now can actually go to republic.com and look at Lora DiCarlo, and you can actually put anywhere between $20, $100, $100,000 if you're able into not just Lora DiCarlo, because the fact is this industry is huge and it's growing right now. I think in 2016, the industry was valued at about 23 billion. If you're looking very specifically at sex tech, and then, or sexual wellness. Right. Currently, the last valuation was $74.77 billion. So almost tripled in the last few years, and they're looking at about 126 billion by 2026. This is an industry that is growing with a CAGR of like 12 to 14%. That is mind blowing. So when you take those kind of numbers
and
to
recession proof
investors, and it's recession proof, guess what? People are always gonna want to fuck. So it's a fact of life. It is totally recession proof. But right now what we've done is we've actually created a really transparent deck. So even if you've never invested in anything, maybe you're not even an accredited investor, most people aren't, you can actually go and see everything that you're getting into, invest a little bit. But what I love about this is that it allows just your average human being with to be able to become more financially literate. So I feel like it's platforms like Republic that allow all sorts of people to actually start to take more control over their finances and where they want to put their money. And the second thing that I love about this is that you're going to find founders like Rebecca Bloom. You're going to find founders like Lora DiCarlo. You're going to find founders that are queer, that are minority, that are creating crazy businesses in really fast growing industries. But the thing that's really cool about this is that we talk constantly about how females get 2% of funding and how 0.2% of that are female founders of color. So, which is ridiculous. So what you are able to do, you are able as an individual to change the game. You can go in and put your money into founders that you believe in, and you want to see them change the game on a business front, on a founder front, on an entrepreneurial front. So I think that's really cool because it actually puts the power back in our hands as normal people to say, I might not be an investor, but this bitch over here, she needs to she's going to kill the game. And you get to back that person as an individual. And I think that in the long run, as we continue down everything with the way that we're changing how we finance, how we build money with crypto. I think things like this are going to become more available and more widely popular. Yeah. And I highly encourage looking into funds like this because it's all a learning game. We don't do things that scare us. Go teach yourself more about this because it is definitely worth your while.
I really like that each of you have some similarities, but have gone through, I would say, all avenues of capital, both, whether it be, sounds like some bootstrapping, high network individuals, institutional VCs, crowdsourcing, and then obviously, generating revenue. So just having a very diversified fundraising experience. My question would be, what are 1 to 2 important lessons that you learned from fundraising that you would like to give to, a founder who is on that journey or wants to be on that journey, particularly a founder who is raising capital for sex tech? Rebecca, anything from you?
Yeah, so obviously there's like a million things that I would like to just do like a data dump for people. I feel like it's always helpful for me to talk to founders who are like 1 to 2 steps ahead. So founders who have raised a Series A or even afterwards that I can just pull lots of gems from. I feel like founders are your best friend when you're starting companies and when you're trying to raise capital. But overall, I would also say don't be afraid to bootstrap if you're able to make it work bootstrapping. I had to get creative. The very first year I was consulting part-time and bootstrapping part-time. And then I quickly saw I needed to devote all energy into the company if I wanted this to grow. And so it was actually a family discussion. How do we make this happen so Rebecca can do this full-time with no salary? I told my husband it was going to be a couple months. It actually turned into be more than a year. But what I would say is don't be afraid to do it in a bootstrapped way, because a couple things. One, it forced me to really get into all communications with my customers and with the followers or like people in the community. So I clearly understood the issue and the problem. And I could really understand like, oh, we actually are going to have a gap coming up because of this new trend happening. And so it's just, it makes you an expert in your community. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is, as much as, you know, in an angel or pre-seed round, they tell you, you know, traction shouldn't matter. Yes, companies raise without revenue, pre-revenue. I feel like for me, sometimes the expectations are unfortunately different. And I started to get more interest when I had more traction. So it makes sense, right? Like good business opportunity, you see the growth. But overall, I would say whatever traction looks like for you, make sure that you promote that and double down on that. So it may be your users, it may be revenue, it may be average order value, like whatever it is that's really standing out from other companies, like focus on why that's working and really dive into that a little bit more to highlight yourself and highlight your business model.
I would say data that backs up that traction, especially if like you're early on. A lot of, because when we first started designing OSE, which was literally a 3-year in the making project, I partnered with Oregon State University to get that project off the ground. It's a very high-tech engineered product that utilizes biomimicry and microrobotics. Like most products, most vibrators have 20 to 50 parts in them. Our first product had almost over 230 parts and actually made movements that were reminiscent of the way that humans move. So in order to stimulate sexually. So it took us a while. So what I did in the interim was we created surveys. We actually created studies that asked people, what are the things you love the most? Like all of this data that we got from real humans that backed up the project that we were doing and the projects that we're going to follow subsequently to the launch of OSE 1. So actually asking people, are you willing to buy this product? How much would you pay for this product? Like very, very specific to our business, to our brand, to our products, and to the direction of the company. Everything that would basically back that up. In addition to, you know, having, you know, the amount of email subscribers that you have, the amount of interaction, the amount of impressions you have on social media. Yes. And then the second thing I think was something I kind of learned a little late in the game. I have been through a couple of accelerators and cohorts where I meet other founders, and I don't think I understood the value of it then, because I was a single founder, a femme-facing founder that was scared. And all I could think is I just got to keep my nose to the grindstone and keep going. And what I realized in hindsight is that you know, and I'm doing that now, but I wish I had made more deep connections with some of these other founders and some of the investors even that I was talking to, like actually spent more time with them, because I realized now that I'm doing that, those people have networks of their own and they have interests of their own. So I would say, yeah, I would say create data pools that back up your product if you are not out and you don't already have traction and you don't have revenue. And also really, really pay attention to those deep connections that you have and widening your network, not widening it so much, but really making valuable connections. You don't have to have a ton of connections, just making really valuable connections and utilizing their networks as well has been a game changer for me.
I guess my 2 tips, the first one would be authentically yourself as much as possible. I think I made the mistake for several months of not doing so because I went through accelerators, I had mentors, and I think they thought our product being called Slutbot and also being like really erotic was like too much. And so we really watered down my pitch for many months, as much as possible. I didn't even use the word Slutbot until like maybe the end of the pitch and things like that. And eventually I got really tired and I decided I was just going to turn the volume all the way up. So in like the first bit of my slide, I talked about being queer, I talked about being non-monogamous and kinky and being a Gen Z market and all of that. And suddenly like it started clicking more. I definitely think some people were alienated faster, but who cares? Because they weren't even going to invest with the watered down pitch either. So
Exactly.
it helped me find the best investors that like immediately were drawn to me. And then my second piece of advice would be, coming from a more academic background, I truly thought that it was going to be like, I present my numbers and then it's kind of this merit-based system where investors like pick the people with like the best traction and growth. And I think after I finished my master's and left the more like academic environment, I quickly learned that actually the only thing that matters with fundraising is like who you know. That's all that matters. And so I started just like taking any meeting possible and treating it like a date. So like at the end of the date, I wanted them to want to go out with me a second time. That was like my only goal. And so once I started doing that, I started meeting people who just genuinely liked me. And then the numbers came like second, if that makes sense. And so I learned this probably like later than maybe other people that are more in a business background from early on. But I would just like say, take any meeting and like chase it, because you don't know like where it's going to land. Because once we got our first large investor, everything after that was easier because he had such a large network. And investors are a little bit like sheep. I don't think they're like always the most like individualistic thinkers. So if someone invests that they think is cool, they'll just do it too. And so that would be like my second piece of advice. No offense, Adrianna.
No, not, I love this. I love the like back and forth. I love the honesty. Anyone who knows me well as an investor, I'm a pretty straight shooter. And so I think these are the gems that need to be dropped. Rebecca, were you going to chime in?
Yeah. Can I say something? So I actually have worked with both founders here. So I like respect any direction people want to grow in sexual wellness. This is a hard new industry to be in. But I would say that I would recommend the opposite of what Brianna said when it comes to taking calls. I did in the beginning take calls with anyone, and it is exhausting. Like you're meeting people, I feel like, that are not aligned or not actively investing or just want to learn from you. Like there's so many reasons people want to take a call with you when you're in an emerging industry. So I think that I started to shift who I wanted to talk to. And I am very intentional about who I ask to meet with. And is it making it harder for me? Maybe. But I also feel like the meetings that I have, it's like dating in the sense that I already know that I've seen your profile and we like each other. You know, it's like there's at least that step that's out of the way a little bit. It's not a blind date, because I wasn't doing well on the blind dates. I was exhausted mentally from it. So that's like what I would say, like, if you really understand your why and you know who you want to be a part of the journey with you, like you should pretend like this is like a lottery ticket for investors. Like if you really believe in what you're doing, like this is a partnership. And so I switched my mentality when I was fundraising, because I was like, I'm never going to make it if I keep taking 200 to 300 calls with anyone who will meet with me. So I think it switched for me, and I think it's working. We'll see.
I think it's definitely a fine balance. It's none of, I would describe all of this as an art, and it works. Different strategies work. I oftentimes do tell, founders in any industry, like try to know that this is within their thesis, how many deals they do a year. And I am of the belief that most investors will take a lot of meetings, and with the intent that they may not just to learn about an industry, for example, or because it came from X X person. And so just being mindful of that. And so it could work in either ways, but to Brianna's point is it is a very network driven industry, unfortunately. And and that's one of the things that I hate about VC. I love the possibilities and innovation, but it is a very network driven industry. Brianna, you brought up something that I thought was really interesting, which is you said the one common thread that I think all of you have is like being your authentic self, and that you were watering down the value proposition and really what you were doing. And so I'm curious if Rebecca or Lora, if you experienced that, where you had to change the messaging for investors compared to what you were taught, the messaging for consumers or on social media.
I think like, as far as being authentic, like 100%, I will be totally honest. When I started doing this, I remember telling one of my executives, I really don't want to be known as that sex toy CEO. And we've actually changed the game in such a way that, like, I realized, because I was afraid of being known to be that, but I was also always like loving talking about this. So that changed over time when I started to realize, like, we're changing the game. And actually it's almost hard. I can't tell people that I'm a sex tech CEO now, because that's all they want to talk about then. But I found that, being entirely, like, I think as femmes and queers, we actually kind of approach business in a very different manner. At first, we kind of approach it with that kind of like age old, like, oh, you have to like hold all your cards and be clandestine about it, and not like give anything up to anybody. And what I found is that the more transparent, the more authentic I am, the more you attract investors, particularly angel investors, that are invested not just in your company, or even not in your company at all. They're invested in you as an individual. I have a couple of investors and folks that I meet with regularly that they were never really even interested in the business. They just saw a passion, and they saw a purpose, and they saw, there's very likely, when you have that much passion and purpose and you have zero fucks left to give, that you actually are probably the person to go change the game. It's not just the idea anymore. So I think, a couple of years ago, I just decided that, I have no fucks left to give. So I would get on stage and talk about some very intimate things, and people would, for the most part, just go, holy crap, like, that, just hearing your experience was life-changing, because I've had similar experiences and I'm terrified to talk about it. But you got on stage and you bared your soul. And I found that I have attracted more people, more investment interest, more media, just by being transparent and authentic. So, trying to sugarcoat or cover up what we really are truly at our core is doing nothing but being detrimental to our ultimate journey. So, yeah.
No, I think that's a fantastic takeaway, and can be leveraged for every single one of your companies, and for current founders who are building in this space. I'm curious if you all think that the appetite for investing in either institutional venture funds, but maybe even angels, has changed since you first got started.
It's our experience, real quick, has increased exponentially in the last 9 to 10, 12 months. Okay. Because we've seen celebrities come out on the scene and back companies like ours. We've seen a lot more in the media, and I've had a lot of investment interest come through directly to me via email or through through the website, saying, hey, like, we see that this is a growing industry. This is something that we're interested in. And we haven't taken them up yet because we're still in the middle of this crowdfund, but I've never seen so much interest in the last 6 months.
What about any other point? Is it getting better, do you believe?
I mean, I'm about to go fundraise again in early 2022.
So we'll talk.
I really hope it's different.
We'll talk in a couple months.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think go ahead, Brianna.
I was just gonna say, I think more than investors, though, the Gen Z getting older and older, and then with the media shifts, that I think they're going to be the two forces that force investors to wake up a little bit, because 18 to 22-year-olds are like so far ahead of millennials.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
that's what I was gonna ask that, which is, why do you think this generation is ready for sex tech? Or maybe I think that generation in particular is leading the pack, unfortunately, in terms of authenticity, in terms of,
Oh, yeah.
you know, sexuality, gender norms, pretty much in every front. I'm of the belief, though, that this generation is more than ready, and maybe kind of a little frustrated with what's on the market today.
And not only they're also unwilling to compromise, because there are so many options for, like, let's say you want a toy race car and you find the same toy race car from 10 different companies. You're going to start, a lot of those Gen Z, and I think some of the early millennials, myself being one, we're really concerned with how sustainable is this company? How purpose driven are they? Are they making a difference in communities and society? What are they doing to get back? So I think, like, that's something I'm really excited to see, but it's also forcing a lot of companies that have been in the game for a long time to start really rethinking and they're probably rethinking their strategy from a profit standpoint, but it's actually forcing them to be a little bit more ethical, so to speak.
I would also say that when it comes to like one-on-one, because I've been doing sexology work for a little over 10 years, like I talk about sex all the time, right? And I was like constantly having similar problems that people were trying to work through. I think there's just this appetite to like stop the quietness of it. I think what we're seeing is that, yes, it's becoming mainstream, and it is taking a lot of sort of like a perfect storm. I think COVID helped with this. I think Gen Z is definitely pushing us. We put out an intimate care report last year that just talked about how Gen Z is radically inclusive, and companies who are not preparing for that like culture and expectation are going to miss the mark. So I would just say that overall, if a brand is doing the right thing and they are thinking of who they are leaving out and who they are including, I feel like it's a good way to start see how companies are differing. And there's still a lot of gender binary. There's still a lot of like really problematic ways of defining things in this category, whether it's because of orientation, because of gender, because of age. Like there's so many, I think, words that are outdated. And I feel that the companies that are willing to like work hard at really understanding what inclusive can mean are going to continue to stand out. But also just like I can tell you this, the issues have not changed. 10 years ago, the issues when it came to sexuality and exploring are the same ones that I'm helping clients with today. And so a couple of years ago, I wrote a Medium article on what I felt that was going to be a revolution that was going to happen, just because I finally started to see that clients were talking to spouses, clients were talking to friends. And it's like, just like, I guess like a slow progression, sorry, it's my child, slow progression of people opening up their own networks and communities. And so then that means they want solutions. And that means they go out and they want to talk about, wait, you loved that toy? So where did you get it? Or wait, you do use a lubricant? So I want a lubricant. It's like this little like snowball effect that I think is finally big enough for like an investable approach from VCs. And there's appetite across the board, I feel like right now.
And then is there something, this question goes to Brianna, which is, what within the sex tech industry or sexual wellness are you excited about? What are you seeing? Yeah.
I think I love all of the toy companies, but I think that we need more like content media related businesses. And I think those were like second to be created, because I feel like a lot of the sex toy companies are more than 5 years old now. But the Dipsy, Us, like Coral, a lot of these other companies where it's on a spectrum from educational to erotic, and sometimes it's a blend. But I think that that's what I'm super excited about, whether it be like audio based or text based or app based. But those are the things that I am noticing a lot.
Any other trends or founders that each of you are tracking that is exciting about this industry?
I think actually, to kind of track back to what Rebecca was saying, I think that companies are starting to realize that, if they can't keep up with the time, which is, we are becoming a lot more, I don't want to say we are becoming, but we are tracking towards becoming a more inclusive society, or at least I'm really hoping so. Yeah. So I think, I'm excited to see more products that are, that speak more to trans bodies, to queer folks, to just to the LGBTQ community, to different kinds of bodies, like Rebecca was saying earlier, like if you're Latina or if you're a person of color, like the pH is different in within the vaginal canal. And I think that level of inclusivity is something I get really excited about. So what we're kind of doing at Lora DiCarlo is kind of trying to encompass, I don't want to say we're boiling the ocean, but we have a 3-tiered approach, which is, the products that you have the experience with, the experiential. You have the sorry, the computer was just like, you raised your hand. I was like, no, I didn't. I guess I did. So we have the products that create experiential. We're also creating lines of intimacy products that are, consumable items that are for before and during and after intimacy and masturbation, like tinctures, pills, whatever. And then the third piece is the content approach. That's educational, entertainment. It's white papers, it's blogs, it's creating videos and all sorts of content. So our approach is we're trying to really create a kind of a triangular platform where we can be more holistic. And I think there's a lot of companies that are really forward thinking and thinking like, okay, we have this really great idea and we're doing this one thing. How can we create complementary services or products that create a more holistic approach and that are more inclusive? So that's what I get excited about. People always ask, like, what's the next big tech? And I think, I think it's more along the lines of how do we get all of society included first before we try to create something new and meaningful if we don't know what meaningful is.
I think you said it really well, and I am optimistic, and I do think that we should follow up because I would like to hear, what that journey and if the industry has changed. I know that a lot of people are evaluating their vice clauses because at the end of the day, there's a lot of opportunity within a multitude of those areas, whether it's cannabis, etc., sex. And so I know we're getting at time. I've gotten a little nudge that we are at time, but really for people who have enjoyed this conversation and want to learn more, follow up with you, where can they find you guys, your brands and your personal accounts?
I can go first. So if anybody's interested in shopping clean intimate care products, you can definitely check out our marketplace. It's thebloomy.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or our text messages. We are sexologist led, so it's really good sexology content that you're getting to inspire you on using your products. It's also social at The Bloomy.
Yeah, and for us, all you have to do is enter your phone number on our website, and then the bot will text you. And like once or twice a week, you'll get basically like little erotic stories sent to you, and it's free to use. There's just like premium experiences like built into the stories, but we'll always have the stories there for free. And then for social, I'll put my personal in there. Our company doesn't use social because it's just a mess to deal with Facebook. So I'm just like, I'm out. I'll deal with Reddit and Discord.
And you can find us pretty simple. It's LoraDiCarlo.com. Just put that in the chat. We're also, you can actually access easily like our customer service. You can access me on socials. And that's at Lora DiCarlo _HQ. And then I'm just Lora _DiCarlo. And one thing that I really pride about our company is we're really involved with our community. So, you know, we try to have like a less than 24-hour turnaround time with anything on, you know, with customer service or with our coaches. And you can reach out to me personally too. I love talking about this stuff. I think being available to our communities is one of the most important factors in creating just a more approachable industry.
Really appreciate that. Thank you again, Lora, Rebecca, and Brianna, for, you know, really, I would say, insightful conversation that was authentic, that I enjoyed. And so thank you, StartOut, for providing this platform for us to have this conversation. And now we're going to invite everyone to go back to the main stage for a closing recap of the Equity Summit. So it was really nice seeing you all. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.